Hello, everyone. So, so I'll be talking about several different things, kind of try to gather different research that I've done and what I want to do in the future together into trying to tell a story here. So one of the first things about ecological restoration is what is the definition of it? Because different people mean different things. But I really like the Society for Ecological Restoration, and they define it as a process of assisting the recovery of native ecosystems which have been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. Each of these have different definitions. But one of the important things to realize is that restoration is a continuum. So you have a whole set of different stages which and actions that can be done from reducing societal impacts to fully recovering native ecosystem. Now, fully recovering native ecosystem might not make sense in some cases, especially when the environment, the surrounding has changed so much. So my interest is mostly about repairing ecosystem function and monitoring the recovery of ecosystems, looking at indicators and trying to quantify functions. Now, the focus of today's talk, when I talk about these ecosystems, the model ecosystem is peatlands. And by peatlands, for me, it's not bogs only. So I look at mostly fens. What's the difference, you say? You ask? So the difference is bogs are rain-fed and fens are groundwater-fed. And since fens are groundwater-fed, they're usually minerally rich, nutrient poor, and basically minerally rich meaning base rich, and usually alkaline. And because of its alkalinity, you have different types of plants which like carbonates. They're called calcilophilic, I think. Yep. So, and also mire. Mire is basically a wetland which is actively forming peat. And peat is any soil partially decomposed, which is made up of 30% organic matter by dry weight. So that's clear and that's out of the way. Now, why peatlands are important? They provide us with several ecosystem services, so the benefits that we get from them. And fens also provide all of these services, provisioning, regulating, cultural, as well as supporting. But what I've looked at and I'm interested by are basically water regulation, carbon storage, biodiversity, as well as peat formation process, which is also part of carbon storage. In terms of hydrological functions, one thing that we like to do, like I'm kind of not really a hydrologist, but we look at hydrostatistics because peatlands are a bit crazy. They don't really follow natural laws, as many hydrologists here would agree, I hope. So there is rainfall, and we look at the water table response to rainfall event. Now, this tells us a lot about how the peat itself is functioning. Because imagine there is a drained fen and a re-wetted fen. If you look here, you'll see where the study was done. So when we compare the response of the water table to rainfall event, we can see a clear picture of a less slope here for the re-wetted fen, and the drained fen has a higher slope, which means that the re-wetted fen is less sensitive to inputs from rain. And the same was the case when we looked at evapotranspiration and water table decline. We saw that water table declines less when you have higher the same atmospheric demand for vaporization of water in the re-wetted one compared to the drained one. So again, larger water table response to rainfall and smaller water table response to rainfall for the re-wetted one or near intact one. So the near intact one you can see here has higher biomass, but also one of the main thing here we found also is that the soil is not that compact. So when the soil is not compact, it has high porosity, and therefore the more water holding capacity for when the water table is below the soil surface, not when it's above. That's important to note. Now, the other thing which is important to note is the evapotranspiration, as I was talking about. So for these two sites, we looked at the evapotranspiration and quantified it using diurnal fluctuation, which is a like water table fluctuation method. Basically, the important thing we found was that the re-wetted fen was evapotranspiring more than the drained fen for the same rain days, sorry, for the same days. And you had lower water table, obviously, and which meant in the drained one, which meant you have lower evapotranspiration because of that, but also lower plant biomass. And the opposite is the case, where the re-wetted site, you can see it has higher biomass. You have Carex acuitiformis growing up to this high, and so on. But it's not always the case that higher biomass leads to higher evapotranspiration and because of higher water demand, because you have vegetation structure also interfering with all of these processes. And how vegetation structure can affect actually may lead to more closed canopy ecosystems with, let's say, equally high water table as open fens to have lower evapotranspiration, at least for rain-free days when there is no interception. And this is because what canopy closure does, it creates its own microclimate. So it decouples the system, especially below it, from the surrounding. So you can have on the open fen direct solar radiation, you have a high wind speed, whereas the inside of the fen woodland, the closed system, has more of a buffering from all of these processes. So that means that the soil evaporation, which can be very high you have to remember the water table is very close to the surface. The soil evaporation is very high. Under canopy evaporation can be very high in the absence of a canopy like this. So microclimate creation is what we hypothesized from the results. Now, also very interesting from there to go back to the leaf. Let's think about what's happening at the leaf scale, because at the end of the day, the evapotranspiration is transpiration and evaporation, right? Although many people don't agree with this, especially not boundary layer meteorologists, but that's a different thing. So how does plant physiology affect ecosystem water balance? You can see here stoma. We know that stoma can be open or closed. Stomata can be open or closed, and it responds to different things such as solar radiation, mainly in terms of photosynthetically active radiation for photosynthesis, and then vapor pressure deficit, which is the atmospheric power to evaporate water or the thirst of the atmosphere. And then there's also humidity and wind speed and temperature. But also, very interestingly, carbon dioxide can have a direct effect on stomata. Higher amounts can actually cause it to close because you can do more with having less time, and you lose less water by taking in more carbon dioxide. So to have a look at this, we went to, so this is in Ireland, in Dunleer. So Professor Lawrence Gill in Trinity College, he set up this area where trees were, again, it was separated from the surrounding. This is the backyard of a person where we were kind of going every other week and doing measurements with porometers of 24 leaves, 24 trees and 3 leaves per tree. And looking at, so this is a phytoremediation system, but the main thing here to look at is that how does stomatal conductance react to increasing solar radiation? So these are individual trees, and you have 3 leaves per trees. And for higher solar radiation, obviously, the stomata opens up, conductance is higher, which indicates that also transpiration is higher when there's water. However, when you have higher vapor pressure deficit, stomatal closure occurs, stomatal decreases. We know this, but this is from the field site. And for me, it's exciting to be part of this research. And you can see that directly it closes. So the balance of these two can actually, you can see a curve like this, that increasing and then decreasing after a certain threshold of, it's called potential evapotranspiration. So these are important to think about because we have to understand restoration also from the plant perspective. We have to think about what species there are, whether they're C4, C3, CAM, very unlikely in these cases. So, because otherwise we will kind of miss out on understanding what it means to restore an ecosystem. How will the functions change? How will the water balance change? And especially in the future when you have higher climate pressures and also increase in carbon dioxide content, we have really, we don't know what will happen and where we will get water to restore and re-wet fen peatlands and other wetlands. So also just a little bit about soil functions. I haven't included everything. This was a very interesting study. I really liked it. It's my favorite study that I've done. So Adam over there and myself, we went to 2 different sites, Story Hill and Bollymore. One is a near natural one, near intact one, and the other is a degraded one. We did loss and ignition, which is basically quantifying the soil organic matter, but also carbonate content we did at 950, and looked at high precision GPS, so for the soil surface, so to understand the microtopography and what it can tell us. We ran generalized additive modeling, and here you see the effect, basically they call it partial effect of soil moisture on SOM, but I like to call it association because it's bidirectional. So you can see that higher soil moisture content can actually lead to higher soil organic matter content, but also because you have a system where it's becoming anaerobic, so a lot of soil organic matter is then protected from high levels of decomposition, which it wouldn't be if it was in contact with oxygen. And then also, higher soil organic matter allows more moisture to be held. And this was the same. It was similar for near intact and degraded, but the shape of the curve is different, nonlinear versus linear. Now, when we looked at the microelevation or microtopography, we thought that we'd get something like where there's higher elevation, we thought that it would be more anaerobic, and therefore you would have less soil organic matter. But for our sites, at these fine scales of kind of 5 meters, 2 meters, we see an elevational difference of 50 centimeters. We see that actually higher microelevation is associated with higher soil organic matter. And we think this is because it is actually indicative of the peat formation process. So when the peat is forming and when the formation process is higher, you have a buildup of peat from the top. And that is what leads to microtopographic formation. So higher areas represent areas of faster peat accumulation. Now, in terms of biodiversity management in alkaline fens, one thing very, very important to note in terms of in general restoration is that we are in an era where so much changes have taken place. So we need to manage restore. We can't just let it be wild. So for example, why is that? Because when we abandon areas, this is a study from Germany, and this is an Eider Valley in Schleswig-Holstein in the northwest. And what happens is that if you leave an area abandoned, then some species take over and become dominant, especially woody species in these kind of river valley mire system. But when you graze it, when you allow it to be grazed at intermediate level, according to the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, it actually results in higher number of species. And instead of grazing, when it's not possible, we can do mowing to manage it. But what happens when encroachment of woody species has already taken place? You can see there. Then in Germany, they remove it sometimes. The forest ecologists would not agree. They are very scared of this. It looks scary. And in native woodland, imagine doing this to native woodlands in Ireland. Not looking forward to it. But so here you have the system. Again, behind you have the woodlands. You have the cleared and mowed fen, so where the tree was removed. And in the front, you have the reference site, which is the only mowed fen. We looked at the biodiversity, and it is appearing to be closer, if you look at the composition according to Bray Curtis, that the mowed and cleared is coming closer to the reference site. It was so successful that they removed the willows from there. Don't be scared, willows are really, they grow everywhere, so it's fine. But there are such transitional areas and ecotones in Ireland as well. You can see here these are only the SACs, so the special areas of conservation of alkaline fens. Native woodlands as well, very, very highly precious. And then you have the semi-natural grasslands, and they interact. And for example, you see there are 37 alkaline fen patches which have at least one native woodland within 200-meter radius, potentially a source for seeds. And is the case for 273 semi-natural grassland patches. So kind of progressive woody encroachment can become a problem for both of these open ecosystems. For example, here in Tory Hill, you can see over 11 years this has happened. Here you have Cladium myriscus species. It's protected. You have it's Annex 1 habitat on the left circle, you will see. So you have greater sedge, fen sedge. It's called calcareous fen. It's a type of alkaline fen, but with Cladium myriscus species. But you can see what's happening there. And you can imagine, just looking at this schematic here, that what actually prevents woody succession in open fens is that nutrient gradient and the wetness gradient. So when you have low nutrient concentration, others can't cope with it. Therefore, you have this environmental filtering. Whereas when you have high also, at the same time, when you have high wetness, many trees cannot cope with it. But when you have environmental pressure causing, let's say, nutrient input from upstream or let's say, higher fluctuation of the water table or water table going down, then seeds can start germinating and take over. And this can entirely change all of that we were talking about. The soil, so litter can fall, litter can decompose differently. Your lignin content, your decomposition resistance might be quite different. So peat formation cannot probably be there. After a while, the whole hydrology, local hydrology is changed. You have higher interception evaporation. Then you can also have a total change in the light regime. And light is required by many of these characteristic fen species because they're light demanding species. So shading and light regime changes also a big problem. So I'm also very, very happy to say that I have started formally today. We are starting our restoration and landscape ecology lab together with Tina Montero over there. So Tina has just started her PhD as an ad astra scholar, and she'll be looking at especially the ecohydrology part of woody plant encroachment along fen woodland ecotones, and co-supervised by Dr. Grace Scott. And many of these things, but hopefully I'm applying for funds. And if anyone is interested, the other things that I'd want to look at are the more soil physics, the vegetation ecology, and at a larger scale, what the catchment input of nutrient might be, and also developing some indicators at the catchment scale. So that's all, and you're all welcome to check this out in a few weeks. It's a website. It was just €4 to buy this site. I don't know why. So anyways, you can take a picture. I'm very excited about it. A lot of people have to acknowledge, because I think it's been, 11 years? More than 11 years, 12, 13 years, I guess. So especially my colleagues in Trinity, my colleagues back in Rostock, as well as Kiel, and many other people who have helped me a lot, and I learned so much from them. Also, a lot of funders, and I got a small fund to do the microtopography work from Irish Research Council a few years ago. So that's all. And if you want to read some of my articles, and it's not updated here. Sorry, there is. If you want, I can send you. But anyways, thank you very much.